Don't torment yourself. Your son is no longer with us, the ex-wife pleaded. But Jack was tormented by one fact. He had managed to get an exhumation, and what was found in the coffin shocked even the investigators. The construction trailer shivered from the wind that swept across the endless steppe. Jack Robinson adjusted his helmet and wiped the sweat from his brow. The July heat hadn't let up even by 8 in the evening. Outside the window, hills stretched to the horizon, dotted with sparse shrubs, while powerful generators hummed next to the trailer, illuminating the construction site with bright floodlights. The metal structures of the future substation jetted from the ground like the skeleton of a giant beast. He was just examining the blueprints for a new power line, sipping lukewarm tea from a metal mug. Work was around the clock. The schedule was tight. The project had to be delivered by September, but the pay was worth every effort. In 6 months of this assignment, he would earn more than he would see at home in 2 years. Money was desperately needed. After the divorce, he had to rent a place and pay alimony. Besides, he wanted to buy Marcus a bicycle for his 8th birthday. When the phone rang, Jack didn't even hear it at first. The diesel engines were too loud. The screen displayed a familiar name, Catherine. The ex-wife rarely called, usually only about matters concerning their son. Jack smiled, imagining Marcus probably begging his mom for permission to talk to his dad. Yesterday, the boy had told him he learned to ride the neighbor boy's scooter. "I'm listening," he said, setting down his pencil and turning down the radio. "Jack." Catherine's voice sounded strange, as if she were speaking through tears. Jack immediately tensed. His ex-wife rarely allowed herself such weakness. What happened? "Catherine, are you crying?" He pushed the blueprints aside and straightened in his chair. "Jack, something terrible happened." Her voice trembled, and a father's heart clenched in fear. "Is it Marcus?" "What's wrong with Marcus?" "Catherine, speak clearly." Jack jumped up so abruptly that he knocked over his chair. The metal legs clanged against the trailer floor. He felt she sobbed, muffled crying audible in the line. He fell from the balcony. "Jack, he's gone. My boy, he's gone." The world around Jack seemed to freeze. The hum of the generators became distant and muted, and the bright lights of the site suddenly dimmed. He leaned against the trailer wall, feeling the ground slip from under his feet. "What do you mean gone?" His voice sounded alien, hoarse. "Catherine, explain properly." "What do you mean fell?" "He died, Jack," Catherine said through tears, choking on her words. "He was playing on the balcony after lunch, climbed onto the railing. I was in the kitchen, cooking dinner, heard a scream, ran out, and he was already lying below." Jack grabbed his head with both hands. Marcus, his 7-year-old boy, who loved climbing everywhere he could, and couldn't. Like a cat, his grandmother always said. How many times had Jack told Catherine to install balcony bars, but after the divorce, he couldn't insist anymore. It wasn't his apartment, not his territory. The ambulance arrived quickly, Catherine continued in a trembling voice. But the doctors immediately said it was too late. Falling from the 5th floor, Jack, he didn't suffer. They said it was immediate. "Shut up!" Jack shouted, unable to listen to the details. "When did this happen? Why didn't you call me immediately?" "Yesterday." "Yesterday morning," Catherine gasped convulsively. "I was in shock, couldn't think of anything. Then the doctors, the police, the paperwork." "Jack, I already buried him." "Buried him?" Jack couldn't believe what he heard. He grabbed the phone with both hands, as if trying to reach her across thousands of miles. "Without me, Catherine? He's my son. My only son. I understand, but what could I do?" Her voice became apologetic, almost guilty. "It would take you more than a day to fly here with transfers, and it's scorching, almost 40 degrees. The authorities require quick burials in this weather." They say you can't delay. And then I just couldn't look at him anymore. Jack closed his eyes, trying to stop his hands from trembling. His little Marcus, who called his dad every evening, chattering nonstop about new friends, about toy cars his dad would definitely bring from the trip, who fell asleep with the phone in his hands while his dad told him bedtime stories over the phone. At which cemetery? He asked with difficulty, trying to compose himself. At Southern. Plot 15, row 7, grave 32. Catherine recited the numbers like a memorized lesson. Jack, come as soon as possible. We need to talk. There are many things that need to be decided. I'm flying out on the first flight. Jack was already rummaging through his desk drawer, searching for the notebook with the airline's numbers. Catherine, tell me, where are his things? His toys, his clothes? A long pause. Only the hum of the generators outside and the distant voices of the night shift workers could be heard. I gave everything away. Her voice became even quieter. I took it to the orphanage and gave some to needy neighbors. I couldn't look at it anymore, you understand? Every toy, every little shirt reminded me. Jack listened in silence, feeling something inside him finally snap. Not only had his son left this life, every trace of his existence had vanished. There was no more teddy bear that Marcus carried everywhere, no construction set they had built together on New Year's Eve, not even the children's drawings on the refrigerator. I'll be there late tomorrow evening, he said in a hoarse voice. Will you meet me at the airport? Of course I'll meet you, Jack. I'm so sorry. I know how much you loved him. He talked about his dad all the time. He kept waiting for you to come. After the call ended, Jack stood for a long time in the middle of the trailer, staring at the darkened windows. Somewhere far away, thousands of kilometers off, his only son lay in the damp earth. And Jack hadn't even been able to walk him on his final journey, hadn't been able to say goodbye, hadn't been able to take him in his arms and tell him how much he loved him. There was a knock on the door. The foreman peeked inside to ask about the next day's shift, but when he saw Jack's face, he immediately fell silent. What happened, Robinson? He asked cautiously, taking off his helmet. My son died, Jack answered distantly, as though speaking of a stranger. I need to fly home. Jesus Christ! Tom whistled softly and shook his gray head. The kid was so little. 7 years old, you said? Of course, go, man. We'll manage without you here. You got money for the ticket? Jack silently shook his head. Everything he earned went to alimony, rent, and his modest life on assignment. A ticket home from Central Asia cost almost half a month's pay. Borrow it. Tom reached for his wallet. Pay me back when you can. Jack's hands trembled as he dialed the airline office number. The dispatcher monotonously listed flights and departure times, and he thought about how he would never again hear his child's laughter through the phone, would never again see Marcus running to him at the airport shouting, "Daddy." The assignment had been due to end in October, and he had planned to take his son for the whole autumn break. They had wanted to go to his grandfather's village, to fish at the pond, pick mushrooms, build a hut out of branches. Now none of those plans would happen. There would be no bike for his birthday, no walks together, no evening calls about kindergarten. There would be nothing. The plane landed at his home airport. Late at night, Jack walked down the long arrivals corridor, feeling like he was in a dream. In the 24-hour trip with transfers, he had hardly slept. Each time he closed his eyes, he saw Marcus waving at him from the balcony. Passengers overtook him, hurrying to the exit, while he trudged slowly, as if every step cost him enormous effort. Catherine was standing at the exit. She had changed a lot in 6 months, lost weight, dyed her hair a darker color. Next to her, a tall, broad-shouldered man around 40 in a denim jacket was smoking. When Jack came closer, Catherine awkwardly introduced him. "This is Ben, he's supporting me right now." Ben extended his hand for a handshake, but Jack ignored it. He wasn't ready to see that his ex-wife had a new man, especially now, when their son had been in the grave for only 3 days. "Let's go to the cemetery," he said flatly. "Jack, it's already dark," Catherine tried to object. "Maybe first home? Rest, eat." "The cemetery," he repeated more firmly. They drove in silence. Ben sat behind the wheel of an old SUV, Catherine next to him, and Jack sat in the back, staring out the window at the familiar streets. The city hadn't changed in 6 months, but it seemed alien, gray. Even the summer flower beds and green trees didn't please the eye. The southern cemetery lay on the outskirts, beyond the industrial district. The car turned off the paved road onto a dirt path, and Jack remembered how he and Marcus had come here a year ago for Catherine's grandmother's memorial. Back then the boy had asked if being dead hurt, and Jack hadn't known what to answer. "Here," Catherine pointed to the fresh grave in the 7th row. The lamps dimly lit the plot. Jack approached the mound of earth, on which stood a simple wooden cross with a plaque. He read it, and froze. "Catherine," he called without turning. "Come here." "What is it?" She approached reluctantly. "Read the plaque." Catherine leaned over the cross. "Marcus Robinson. 20162024. Marcus was born in 2017, Jack said quietly. "March 2017. He was 7, not 8. I was in shock," Catherine stammered. "I probably made a mistake when ordering the plaque." "It can be corrected." Jack stood at the grave for a long time, trying to imagine that his son lay beneath that earth. He couldn't. Too little time had passed. It felt unreal. Just 4 days ago, Marcus had called him before bed, asking for a story about boggers. "Let's go home," Catherine said, shivering from the night wind. "You need to rest." But when they arrived at the familiar 9-story building where their family had once lived, Catherine suddenly said, "Jack, I don't live there anymore. After what happened, I can't stay in that apartment. Ben and I rented another place." "What do you mean you don't live there?" "And my things?" "Marcus's things? I told you on the phone, I gave everything away. The kids' things, toys, and your old stuff is in bags." "I have them." "Show me the apartment," Jack demanded. Catherine exchanged a glance with Ben and reluctantly agreed. She still had the keys. The apartment hadn't been officially sold yet. They had only agreed with the buyers. They climbed to the 5th floor on foot. The elevator wasn't working. The landing smelled of cats and bleach. Catherine opened the familiar door, and Jack stepped inside. The apartment was empty. Not just empty, but swept clean to the last speck of dust. In the room where Marcus had lived, nothing remained. No bed, no toy cupboard, no posters of cars on the walls. Even the wallpaper had been partially torn down. "Where's his bed?" Jack asked, surveying the bare walls. "I gave it to a large family in our building," Catherine said, standing in the doorway without entering the room. "They had a 3rd child. They needed the furniture." Jack went to the window. Below, he could see the playground where Marcus had loved to play with neighborhood kids. Nearby grew the old poplars Marcus called his uncle trees. Everything was as before, but it felt dead. "Show me the balcony?" he asked. Catherine visibly paled. "Why do you need that, Jack?" "You don't." "Show me," he repeated firmly. The balcony door in the living room was locked. Catherine fumbled with the lock for a long time, her hands trembling. The balcony was empty too, no flower pots that had once stood there, no fishing rod Marcus had received from his grandfather for his birthday. Jack inspected the railing, ordinary metal, just over a meter high. For a 7-year-old, high enough that climbing over it wasn't exactly easy. How exactly did this happen? He asked, not turning to his ex-wife. "I already told you." He was playing, climbed onto the railing. Why would he climb onto the railing? What was he doing there? I don't know. Catherine's voice sharpened. Maybe he was flying toy planes or looking for something. Kids are unpredictable. Jack remembered that Marcus was afraid of heights. At the amusement park, the boy had refused to ride the Ferris wheel, and on the playground slide, he always asked Dad to spot him. And now, he had climbed onto the railing of the 5th floor himself. Where were you at that moment? In the kitchen, making lunch. I heard him talking on the balcony. Talking to whom? He was talking to himself. Playing some game, Catherine said, growing increasingly nervous. Jack, enough. It's hard enough for me to talk about this. Ben, who had been silent until now, stepped forward and placed a hand on Catherine's shoulder. Don't torment yourself, dear. Let's go home. Dear, Jack noted silently. So, their relationship wasn't new. He wondered how long they had been seeing each other. Catherine, I want to at least take something of my son's things, he said. Maybe there are some photos, drawings left? I gave everything away, I told you, she said, already heading toward the exit. I couldn't look at it. And the documents? Birth certificate, medical records? When registering the death, I submitted everything to the archive. Jack once again scanned the empty apartment. His son had lived here for 3 years, and there was no trace of that life. As if Marcus had never existed at all. As they descended the stairs, an elderly neighbor, Aunt Alice from the 4th floor, was coming up. Seeing Jack, she stopped. Oh, Jack, you finally came. My condolences, dear. Such a tragedy. Thank you, Aunt Alice. I keep wondering. The old woman shook her head. How did this happen? The boy was quiet, careful. He never went out on the balcony alone. Catherine tugged at Jack's sleeve. Let's go. Don't keep Aunt Alice. But Jack stayed. What do you mean, never went out alone? He was always with his mom or another adult, the neighbor explained. I can see your balcony from my window. Marcus was afraid of heights. I remember once he asked me if it hurt to fall. Aunt Alice, we have to go, Catherine said sharply. It's also strange that it was so quiet that day, the old woman continued, ignoring the interruption. Usually kids are screaming, playing, but it was so silent. Jack wanted to ask more questions, but Catherine was already dragging him down the stairs. Ben followed behind, stomping loudly in his heavy boots. They drove in silence all the way to Ben's house. It was a private 2-story home in a new neighborhood, tall fence, alarm system. Jack was offered to stay overnight in the guest room. We'll talk about everything tomorrow, Catherine said goodbye. You need to rest and pull yourself together. But Jack couldn't sleep. Lying on a stranger's bed in a stranger's house, he thought about how something in Catherine's story didn't add up. The wrong date on the grave, the empty apartment, the neighbor's words that Marcus feared heights and never went onto the balcony alone. And most of all, why had Catherine rushed the funeral? Couldn't she have waited at least 2 days until he arrived? And why did she immediately get rid of all the child's things? Most parents, on the contrary, keep mementos of their deceased children. Outside, cars hummed, a dog barked somewhere, and Jack lay with his eyes open, feeling a growing, uneasy suspicion. In the morning, Jack woke to birdsong. The house was quiet. Catherine and Ben were probably still asleep. He got dressed and went out into the yard for some fresh air. His head ached from lack of sleep and heavy thoughts. On his way back, he met Ben's neighbor at the gate, a retired man in a tracksuit watering his flower beds. You must be here for Ben? The old man greeted him. I'm Clint Shepard. Jack. Yes, he hosted. And you're the one whose son passed away? The pensioner shook his head sympathetically. Ben told me terrible thing, children on balconies. I have a grandson, so I tell my wife, I never leave him alone by the window for a second. How long have you known Ben? About a year and a half now. He lived alone before, but recently a woman moved in with him. She said she had a child, but I've never seen the kid. Jack became alert. Never seen? When did she move in? About 2 months ago, maybe a bit more. Ben said she had a son, 7 years old. I even prepared a sandbox in the yard, the neighbor continued. Thought he'd play a lot. But he's never shown up. So, Catherine moved in with Ben a month before Marcus's death. Why hadn't she mentioned this, and why had the neighbors never seen the boy? At breakfast, Jack decided to clarify the situation. Catherine, the neighbor says you moved in with Ben 2 months ago. So that was before Marcus died? Catherine choked on her coffee. I didn't move in, we just, sometimes stayed here. Marcus liked the big house, the yard. But the neighbor says he never saw the child. We rarely played in the yard, Ben interjected. Marcus was shy, preferred playing indoors. Something about their explanations didn't add up. Jack knew his son. The boy loved new places and eagerly made friends. And why had Catherine hidden that she was in a serious relationship with Ben? I want to talk to the neighbors in our building, Jack said. Maybe someone saw something that day. Why dig into the past? Catherine grew nervous. Jack, it will only bring more pain. I need to understand how it happened. After breakfast, he went to the old 9-story building. He started with Aunt Alice. The elderly woman served him tea and spoke willingly. It was a strange day, Jack. I was home all morning, nursing my foot. I heard the ambulance arrive around noon, then the police, and people gathering downstairs. They said the boy had fallen. I looked out onto the balcony and there was your Catherine standing over Marcus, crying. Did you hear anything before that? Screams, noise? That's the thing, I heard nothing. If the child had fallen, he should have screamed, gotten scared. But it was so quiet I even thought they went somewhere. Did you see Catherine earlier that day? Aunt Alice thought for a moment. You know, now that I remember, I didn't see her in the morning. She always went to the store early, when it was quiet, and Marcus went with her. But that day I didn't see them. Jack went down a floor to the Carter's apartment. They had 3 children, and the eldest, Bruce, was friends with Marcus. Uncle Jack. The boy exclaimed. Where's Marcus? We were going to play war. Jack's heart tightened. The child still didn't know about the tragedy. Bruce, go to your room, his mother said firmly. And you come in, Jack. Olivia, a tired-looking woman around 35, poured tea and spoke quietly. Bruce keeps asking about Marcus. We haven't told him yet. How do you explain something like this to a 7-year-old? On the day of the incident, did you see Marcus? No, I didn't. Bruce was waiting for him in the yard all morning but never saw him. Around noon we heard the sirens. Did you see Catherine that day? The woman frowned. It's strange that you ask. I was just thinking about that. Catherine usually went out with Marcus in the morning. They went to the neighboring yard to the swings. But that day I didn't see her, not until the ambulance arrived. In the last few weeks, did you notice anything unusual? Olivia hesitated. I don't know if I should say, but Marcus once asked Bruce if Mom could give a child to strangers. Bruce told me later. We thought it was just a game. When was that? About 2 weeks ago, no more. And Marcus also said that his mother had met a new man who wanted them to have only their own children. Jack felt a chill run through him. So Catherine and Ben were planning a future together, and Marcus was in their way. Next, he visited the local police officer. Sergeant River received him reluctantly. The case is closed. Accidental death. What else is there to investigate? I want to see the files. Were there any witnesses to the fall? No witnesses. The mother found the body. The scene was inspected, everything documented. Was the apartment inspected in detail? Why? Obvious accident. The boy was playing on the balcony. He fell. Unfortunately, these things happen. Can I see the report? Reluctantly, River pulled out a thin folder. It contained only a few sheets, the call report, the inspection protocol, and the doctor's conclusion. Jack read every line carefully. It says here that the mother heard a scream at 13:20, but the ambulance was called at 13:35, he noted. Why the delay? Jack asked. The woman was in shock, the officer shrugged. She didn't think to call right away. Was there an autopsy? What autopsy? The boy fell from the 5th floor, it's obvious. Jack flipped through the pages and noticed a strange detail. It says here that the child was in home clothes, shorts and a t-shirt. But what about his shoes? He was at home, walking barefoot. But if he was playing on the balcony, why wasn't he wearing shoes? It was hot outside, the concrete must have been scorching. The officer shrugged again. Who knows? Kids are unpredictable. Leaving the station, Jack felt a growing sense of anxiety. Too many oddities. The neighbors hadn't seen Catherine that morning. Marcus had asked about whether mothers could give children to strangers. The fall happened in silence. The boy had been barefoot on a scorching balcony. He decided to check one more thing. 6 months ago, before leaving for a business trip, he had installed a surveillance system in the apartment. The cameras were hidden, Catherine didn't even know they existed. The recordings were stored on a cloud server. At an internet cafe, Jack logged into his account. His heart raced. The system had worked until July 15th, then the recordings abruptly stopped, exactly on the day Marcus died. Jack reviewed the last files. On the morning of July 15th, the apartment was empty. The camera in the children's room showed an empty space. The living room was silent too. At 12:30, the recording suddenly cut off. Someone had deliberately disabled the surveillance system on the day of the tragedy, and that someone knew about its existence. That evening, back at Ben's, Jack confronted Catherine directly. Why did you turn off the surveillance cameras? Catherine went pale. What cameras? What are you talking about? Don't pretend. The system was turned off on the very day Marcus died. Strange coincidence, don't you think, Jack? I don't know anything about any cameras. Her voice became hysterical. Maybe the power went out, or the internet. But Jack no longer believed a single word she said. Too much lying, too many inconsistencies. And above all, complete indifference to the memory of his son. What kind of mother throws away all her child's belongings the day after the funeral? I want an exhumation, he said firmly. What? Catherine jumped from the couch. Are you insane? I want to make sure that it's really Marcus in the grave. Jack, stop. She screamed. You're mocking your son's memory. This is cruel, this is wrong. But Jack no longer listened to her protests. Tomorrow he would go to a lawyer, demand a reopening of the investigation, exhumation, and a thorough review of all the circumstances, because with each passing hour, he became more convinced. His son had not fallen from the balcony. Something completely different had happened to Marcus. And Catherine knew it perfectly well. The next morning, Jack went to a law firm on the Central Street. Lawyer Roger Wilson received him in a spacious office filled with bookshelves and case files. I understand your grief, the elderly lawyer said sympathetically after hearing Jack's account. Losing a child is terrible. But an exhumation is a serious procedure. There must be strong grounds. I have grounds. Jack pulled out his notebook, where he had recorded all the inconsistencies, the wrong date on the gravestone, the disabled surveillance cameras, Catherine's strange behavior. The lawyer listened attentively, making notes from time to time. That's not enough for a court, he shook his head. The date on the monument could have been engraved incorrectly. The cameras could have failed due to technical issues. and the fact that the woman got rid of the child's belongings. People deal with grief in different ways. And how do you explain that the neighbors didn't see them that morning on the day of the tragedy? And why was the child barefoot on a scorching balcony? Circumstantial evidence, Roger sighed. We need direct proof or serious violations in the original investigation. Jack felt growing despair. But I'm his father. Don't I have the right to make sure my son is in that grave? You do, the lawyer nodded. But the procedure is complicated. First, you need to get the criminal case reopened, then obtain court permission for the exhumation. And for that, you need new circumstances or significant violations in the initial investigation. The lawyer opened the code and showed the relevant article. See, exhumation is only possible if there is new information that is materially significant to the case, or if gross violations were discovered during the initial examination. And what counts as a gross violation? Lack of a mandatory autopsy in the case of a violent death, for example, or improper documentation. Jack remembered the officer saying that a detailed examination had not been conducted. And if no autopsy was done at all? The officer said everything was obvious. The lawyer's eyes lit up. Now that's interesting. By law, any death of a child from injuries must undergo a forensic medical examination. If that wasn't done, it's a serious violation. Roger picked up the phone. We need to request the medical documents. If it turns out the required examination wasn't conducted, we'll have grounds. They went to the morgue at the city hospital. Chief Pathologist Kyle King, a thin man in a white coat, greeted them coldly. Everything regarding the boy Robinson was handled correctly. There can be no complaints. Show us the autopsy report, the lawyer requested. There was no autopsy, the doctor shrugged. Cause of death is obvious, multiple injuries from a fall. Why traumatize the parents? Doctor, Roger said firmly, in the case of a violent death of a minor, a forensic examination is mandatory. It's required by law. Kyle visibly tensed. Well, you see, the mother was in shock, asked not to stress the child further. And the cause of death is clear anyway. Who gave permission to skip the autopsy? The lawyer pressed. Investigator Mitchell said an external examination would suffice. And where is this investigator Mitchell? On vacation. Gone for a month. Jack and Roger exchanged a look. Too many coincidences. I want to see the registration log, the lawyer demanded. Kyle reluctantly brought a thick notebook. Roger flipped through the pages until he found the entry they needed. Look, he showed Jack the line. July 15th. Robinson Marcus, 7 years old. Death from injuries consistent with a fall from height. Burial allowed without autopsy at the mother's request. And where is the investigator's signature? Asked the lawyer. In the column was an illegible squiggle. That's Mitchell's signature, Roger pointed to the scribble. Yes, seems like it. And the investigative department stamp? Kyle started to turn pale. You see, there was a fuss, it was hot, the mother was rushing. Doctor, you broke the law, the lawyer said firmly. Burial without a mandatory autopsy, lack of proper documentation, that's enough to reopen the case. Leaving the morgue, Roger was almost exhilarated. We have grounds. Gross procedural violations are obvious. We'll submit an application to the prosecutor's office to reopen the investigation. But at the prosecutor's office, they were met with disappointment. The duty prosecutor, a young man in an expensive suit, listened to their statement and shook his head. Gentlemen, the child has been buried, the family has suffered their grief. Why stir up the past? Formal violations are one thing, but real necessity is another. But the law is the law, Roger objected. The law should serve people, not torment them. I see no grounds to traumatize the mother of a deceased child. And the father's rights? Jack snapped. I want to know the truth. The truth is that your son tragically died. Accept it. The prosecutor clearly had no intention of pursuing the case. Jack suspected that, here too, someone had worked to sweep the matter under the rug. "Do you have any media contacts?" Roger asked as they left the prosecutor's office. "No." "Why?" "Sometimes a newspaper article works better than official appeals. Officials don't like publicity." The next day, they met with James, a journalist from the local paper. The young man in jeans and a t-shirt was intrigued by the story. "Interesting case," he said, taking notes. "The father demands exhumation, but the authorities refuse. Great material for an investigation. You'll definitely write it up. There are many stories like this, but few dare to speak openly." "Aren't you afraid of the publicity?" "I'm only afraid of one thing, that the truth will remain hidden," Jack replied. The article was published a week later under the headline, "Why isn't a father allowed to bury his son by law?" The journalist detailed all the violations during the investigation, cited experts on the necessity of a forensic examination, and quoted the legal requirements. The effect exceeded expectations. Readers began calling the editorial office, outraged by the officials' arbitrariness. Several lawyers offered Jack pro bono assistance. Most importantly, the prosecutor's office received instructions from higher authorities to look into the Robinson case. 3 days after the publication, the same prosecutor who had previously refused called Jack in for a meeting. "We have reviewed your statement," he said in a noticeably more polite tone. "Indeed, procedural violations occurred. We are reopening the investigation into your son's death. Exhumation. After a further review of the circumstances, the court will consider your petition for exhumation." Jack felt mixed emotions, relief that the case was finally moving, and fear of what might be found in the grave. What if he was wrong? What if Marcus really was there, and all the discrepancies were just tragic coincidences? But there was no turning back. Too many questions demanded answers. And if there was even the slightest chance that his son was alive, he had to see this through to the end. That evening, Catherine called. "Jack, what have you done?" Her voice trembled with anger. "You're sullying our entire family in the newspapers. I'm looking for the truth about my son's death." "What truth?" "He's dead, understand? Dead and buried, and you're putting on a circus. If everything is legitimate, what are you afraid of in an exhumation?" A long pause. Then Catherine said quietly, "You will regret this, Jack. You will regret it deeply," and hung up. 2 weeks of legal proceedings and bureaucratic procedures later, Jack received the long-awaited call from his lawyer. "The decision has been made. Tomorrow at 10 a.m. Exhumation. Be mentally prepared. This will be a difficult ordeal." The night before the exhumation, Jack could not sleep. Lying in his hotel room, he mentally went over all possible scenarios. If Marcus was in the coffin, he would go insane with guilt. If it was another child, where was his son? Was he even alive? In the morning, the entire team had gathered at the cemetery. Investigator River, not the local cop, but from the regional prosecutor's office, a forensic expert, a medical examiner, witnesses, and workers. Jack stood aside with his lawyer, Roger Wilson, feeling his heart pounding. "Mr. Robinson, are you sure you want to be here?" The investigator asked kindly. "This could be very difficult." "I'm sure," Jack replied firmly, though his knees wobbled with anxiety. Catherine arrived with Ben. She was as pale as a sheet and held her partner's hand. At the sight of Jack, her eyes flashed with anger. "I hope you get what you were looking for," she hissed through clenched teeth. The workers began carefully removing the soil from the grave. They worked slowly, following all proper procedures. Jack couldn't take his eyes off the darkening pit. With every shovelful, his heart beat faster. "Here's the lid," announced the senior worker. The coffin was simple, pine, already darkened by moisture. A metal plaque on the lid bore the name Marcus Robinson. Jack closed his eyes. Seeing that name hurt more than he had expected. "Lift it," the investigator commanded. The coffin was slowly lifted from the ground and placed on special supports next to the grave. The elderly medical examiner, Kornilov, with his gray beard, approached with his tools. "We'll open it now." "Mr. Robinson, this is your last chance to step back." "I'm not stepping back," Jack rasped. The coffin lid shifted with an unpleasant creak. Kornilov carefully lifted it and peered inside, and suddenly froze. "Something's wrong," the investigator said, alarmed. "I need a closer look." The medic took a flashlight and leaned over the coffin. Jack couldn't resist and stepped forward. What he saw made him stagger. In the coffin lay the body of a child, but it wasn't Marcus. The face was badly damaged, but the build, the hair, it was all different. "This isn't my son," he whispered. "Are you sure?" The investigator asked, peering in as well. "Sure," Jack said, pointing to the left wrist of the deceased. Marcus had a burn scar on his wrist, big and noticeable. "It's not here." The medical examiner examined the wrist closely. Indeed, no scar is visible on the left wrist. "And when did he get that burn?" "At 5 years old." "He knocked a pot of soup onto himself." Jack swallowed hard. The scar remained very noticeable. Kornilov continued his examination. "The build doesn't match either. This child is noticeably thinner." "And the hair. What color was your son's hair?" "Dark blonde, curly. And this is straight, lighter." The medic shook his head. "We'll need to take DNA samples, but it's already clear, this is not your child." Jack turned to Catherine. She stood pale as chalk, her eyes wide with horror. Ben held her by the shoulders, but he too looked shaken. "Catherine," the investigator said slowly, "can you explain how you mistook someone else's child for your son?" I was in shock," she stammered. The face was so damaged, and the clothing looked similar. "What clothing?" Kornilov was examining the remains. "The body is unclothed." "There's no clothing." "Well then there were blue shorts and a white t-shirt." "Ma'am," the investigator said sternly, "do you understand the seriousness of this situation? If you misidentified someone else's child, where is your son?" Catherine suddenly burst into tears. "I don't know. I don't know where he is. Maybe he was taken while I went to the store." "To the store?" Jack stepped toward her. "You said you were home, cooking lunch." "Yes, no," I got confused. She floundered between versions, stumbling over her words. Ben tried to comfort her. "Women who have experienced trauma may not remember accurately." "And where were you on July 15th? The investigator asked him. "At work, of course. I work at a construction company." "People there can confirm it." "They will definitely confirm it," the investigator promised. "For now, Ms. Robinson, you need to come to the station to give a detailed statement." "I'm not going," Catherine shouted. "My son is dead." "What do you want from me?" "Your son, apparently, is alive," the investigator replied coldly. "And the dead child is someone else entirely. We will find out who he is and how he ended up in the grave labeled Marcus Robinson." Meanwhile, Kornilov continued the examination. Preliminary data: the boy was 6 to 8 years old, with light hair and a slender build. Death was caused by multiple injuries consistent with a fall from a great height. Time of death was roughly 2 weeks ago, matching the burial date. So this child really did fall, the investigator noted. But who is he, and under what circumstances did this happen? Maybe a homeless kid? Wandering around, fell somewhere, Ben suggested uncertainly. Then how did he end up under Catherine's window? Jack asked reasonably. And why did she mistake him for her son? The investigator approached Catherine, who was still crying. Miss Robinson, I am officially notifying you that you are suspected of giving false statements and concealing circumstances regarding the disappearance of a minor. You have the right to remain silent, but it's better to tell the truth. Where is your son Marcus? Catherine lifted her tear-streaked face. I don't know, honestly, I don't know. But in her eyes, Jack read fear, not the grief of a lost mother, but the fear of being exposed. She knew where Marcus was. She had to know. We'll find him, Jack said quietly, looking her in the eyes. No matter where you hide him, we will find him. Catherine turned away, but he caught her lips trembling. The exhumation was not completed until evening. The body of the unknown child was sent to the morgue for detailed examination, while Catherine and Ben were taken to the police station. Jack remained alone at the cemetery, standing before the empty grave. His son was alive. He felt it in his heart. But where was Marcus? In what condition? Was he afraid? Was he calling for his dad? Hold on, son, Jack whispered into the gathering darkness. Dad will find you. He will definitely find you. The following days were a true hell of waiting for Jack. Catherine and Ben were interrogated at the station, but both remained stubbornly silent or gave contradictory statements. Ben claimed to know nothing about Marcus's disappearance, while Catherine alternated between crying, claiming she remembered nothing due to shock, and suddenly shouting unrelated accusations at Jack. It's all his fault, she yelled during interrogation. He abandoned the family, left for money. Marcus cried every day, waiting for his dad. But investigator River did not give in to emotion. Catherine, tears won't help here. We have the body of an unknown child in your son's grave. This is a serious crime. Either you tell the truth, or you will face the full extent of the law. On the third day of questioning, Jack's lawyer Roger brought news. There's been progress. The examination showed that the deceased boy is not local. Blood type is a positive, while your Marcus is B negative. It's documented in the medical record. So it's definitely not him. Not him, Jack breathed a sigh of relief. Not him. Moreover, judging by the condition of the teeth and overall development, the child had lived in poor conditions. Possibly a homeless child or from a troubled family. And has Catherine said anything? She's still silent. But Ben has started giving statements. He claims that on the morning of July 15th, Catherine called him in a panic, saying Marcus had disappeared. She asked for help finding him. And what did he do? According to him, they searched for the boy all day, and in the evening found the body of some child under the window. Catherine supposedly decided it was Marcus, thinking he had fallen from the balcony. Jack shook his head. Nonsense. How could anyone confuse their own child with someone else's? Ben says the face was badly damaged, and Catherine was hysterical, Roger added. But the story is weak. The investigator doesn't believe it. That same evening, there was a breakthrough. River summoned Jack to the station. We've found results from checking Ben Kulikoff's connections. It turns out he's not just a construction worker. 3 years ago he was implicated in a child trafficking case, though they couldn't prove anything. Child trafficking? Jack felt a chill inside. He was suspected of ties to a group that kidnapped and sold minors, mainly for illegal adoptions abroad. Does that mean he sold my son? Jack managed to choke out. For now it's only a theory. But today Catherine gave her first confessions. Apparently she realized Ben was setting her up. The investigator opened a folder with the protocols. She claims Ben suggested they get rid of the child. Said they wanted to live together, start a new family, and Marcus was in the way. At first she refused, but then agreed. How could she agree? Jack struggled to contain his rage. According to her, Ben knew people who would find the boy good adoptive parents. He promised nothing bad would happen to the child, that he would just live with another family. And the corpse, where did it come from? Her version is inconsistent. Sometimes she says Ben found the body of a dead homeless child somewhere. Sometimes she claims it was an accident. Jack clenched his fists. Where's my son? Not here yet, Catherine said. She insists she doesn't know. She claims Ben took the boy and she never saw him again. And what does Ben say? He denies everything. Says Catherine went mad with grief and is inventing stories. The following days were the hardest of Jack's life. He couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, only wandered the city imagining where Marcus might be, in dens, in a trafficker's basement, or maybe already taken abroad. Roger tried to calm him. Jack, if the boy was sold for adoption, they'll keep him well. He's a commodity, they need to keep him in good condition. What commodity? Jack exploded. He's my son, do you understand? My only child. The breakthrough came unexpectedly. River summoned Jack in the middle of the night. Catherine had broken down and gave full testimony. Your son is alive. Jack felt dizzy with relief. Where is he? There's an abandoned tourist base in the suburbs. There's an illegal shelter for children being prepared for sale. We're going there right now. In the car, the investigator explained the details. Ben was indeed connected to child traffickers. They had an entire network. They kidnapped or bought children from troubled parents, kept them in illegal shelters, and then sold them to childless families or overseas. And the corpse? One of the children in that shelter died of illness. Ben suggested using the body to stage Marcus's death. Catherine agreed. She got an alibi, money, and got rid of the child all at once. How long has he been there? Almost 3 weeks. Catherine says he was being prepared for sale to a family in a neighboring region. Jack clenched his hands into fists. There could be no delay. Losing his son for good after everything would be unbearable. The forested tourist base lay 20 kilometers from the city. Once workers from a local factory vacationed there, but after the plants collapsed, the base fell into disrepair. The perfect place for illegal activity, remote, far from prying eyes. The operation was carried out without sirens or lights. Several cars with operatives surrounded the area while River and Jack headed to the main building. Whatever you see, stay calm, the investigator warned. The children may be frightened or traumatized. The door was broken down quickly. Inside, the air smelled of dampness and something else, fear, disease, hopelessness. In the first room, 2 adults, a man and a woman, were discovered trying to hide something in a cupboard. Hands on your heads. An operative commanded. From the far end of the corridor, children's voices could be heard, scared, quiet. Jack ran toward them without waiting for permission. In a large room, 8 children of different ages were sitting on mattresses. All were thin, pale, in dirty clothes. And among them Marcus. Jack shouted. The boy lifted his head. He was terribly emaciated, his hair dirty, his gaze fearful. But it was his son, alive and unharmed. Papa! Marcus whispered uncertainly, as if he could not believe his eyes. Jack rushed to him, dropped to his knees, and hugged him so tightly that the boy let out a quiet whimper, but did not pull away. He clung even tighter to his father's jacket. Papa, son, Jack whispered, feeling tears streaming down his face. It's over. We're going home. And Mom said you didn't want to see me anymore, Marcus said softly. That you have another family now? Mom lied. Son, Papa will never leave you. Never. The other children watched the scene with wide, frightened eyes. Operatives carefully questioned them, learning their names and the circumstances that brought them to the shelter. All the children will be taken into protection, River ordered. We'll search for relatives, and in the meantime, place them in children's homes. And Uncle Ben said they would find me new parents, Marcus told Jack, not letting go of his father's hand. He said they'd love me very much and buy me toys. Uncle Ben? Jack asked cautiously. He brought me here, the boy said. Stayed a little while, and then the new mom and dad would come. Jack closed his eyes, fighting a surge of rage. How could anyone deceive a 7-year-old child, convincing him that his parents had abandoned him? There will be no new parents, he said firmly. You have a father, and he's not going anywhere. And Mom? Marcus asked timidly. Jack didn't know how to answer. How do you explain to a child that his mother wanted to sell him, that she chose a new man over her own son? Mom is sick, he finally said. Doctors are treating her. In the meantime, we'll live together. Marcus nodded, seemingly willing to believe any explanation as long as his father didn't disappear again. The operation was completed by morning. The organizers of the illegal shelter were arrested, and the children were sent to the hospital for medical examinations. Marcus clung to his father so tightly that the doctors had to examine him while Jack held him in his arms. Physically, the boy is healthy, the doctor reported. Emaciated, stressed, but nothing critical. The main focus now is psychological rehabilitation. We'll manage, Jack promised, stroking his son's head. Catherine was arrested on charges of human trafficking and giving false testimony. Ben faced an even longer sentence. The investigation revealed that the shelter at the tourist base had existed for 2 years, and dozens of children had passed through it. How long did they give her? Jack asked Roger when the sentence was announced. 8 years, considering her cooperation with the investigation. It could have been more. Jack nodded. He didn't care. The main thing was that Marcus was home, alive and well. Everything else no longer mattered. The first days after returning home were difficult. Jack took unpaid leave and devoted himself entirely to his son. Marcus was afraid to be alone, following his father everywhere, even for a minute, sleeping only in the same room, waking up at night and anxiously calling. Papa, are you here? I'm here, son, I'm not going anywhere, Jack would answer each time, and the boy would calm down. They rented a small 2-room apartment in a quiet neighborhood, far from the places they had lived before. Marcus needed to start a new life, free from the painful memories of his mother and her betrayal. The child psychologist Jack brought for Marcus explained that the boy had suffered severe psychological trauma. His world had collapsed. The closest person to him, his mother, had deceived and abandoned him. What should I do? Jack asked. Patience, consistency, love. Don't make empty promises, keep everything you say. And most importantly, never speak badly about his mother in front of him, no matter how difficult it is. That was the hardest part. When Marcus asked, Papa, why did Mom give me away? Jack wanted to shout the full truth about that woman, but he held back. Mom was sick, son. She didn't understand what she was doing, but Papa found you and will never give you to anyone else. Gradually, life began to settle. Jack found work at a local design firm. The salary was lower than what he earned on business trips, but he was close to his son. Marcus was enrolled in a new school where no one knew their story. How's school? Jack asked every evening. Good. Only Mitchell asks, where's my mom? And I don't know what to say. Tell him your mom is far away, and you live with your dad. Is that true? Will she ever come back? Jack remained silent for a long time. Catherine was serving time in a women's high-security colony, with 6 years left. And more importantly, he wasn't sure he wanted her back in his son's life. I don't know, Marcus. Time will tell. The boy nodded and didn't press further. Children are still capable of accepting the world as it is, without demanding explanations for everything. 6 months later, an event occurred that would change their lives for the better. Olivia, a recently divorced 32-year-old elementary school teacher, moved into the neighboring apartment with her daughter Molly. Molly was 9, just a year older than Marcus. At first, they just greeted each other on the stair landing. Then the children became friends, playing in the yard and doing homework together. Olivia sometimes invited Marcus to spend half-days with them, and Jack reciprocated. "Papa, Aunt Olivia is nice," Marcus said after one of his visits. "She makes delicious cookies and she's nothing like Mom." "Nothing like her?" Jack asked cautiously. "She's kind and never yells, and she doesn't scold Molly even when she breaks something." Jack realized his son was comparing Olivia to Catherine, and the comparison clearly favored their neighbor. Jack himself also began noticing that he enjoyed spending time with Olivia. She was calm, wise, and a good listener, never giving unsolicited advice. After work, they sometimes had tea in her kitchen while the children played in the other room. "It's hard being alone with a child," she once said. "Yes," Jack replied, "but we manage. I can see you're a good father. Marcus loves you very much." "What else does he have?" she said, smiling wryly. "I'm all he has." "Not just that. You two clearly have a real bond." Not all parents can say that. By the end of the year, their relationship had become serious. Jack realized he was falling in love but feared rushing things. He had been through too much and approached people cautiously. "Papa," Marcus said one winter evening, "can I call Aunt Olivia Mom?" Jack nearly choked on his tea. "Why do you want that?" "She loves me like a son, and I love her like a mom. And Molly will be like a sister to me. We'll have a real family." "And what about your real mom?" Marcus thought for a moment. "I'll have 2 moms. One is far away, and the other is near. Aunt Olivia says that's okay." It turned out that the children had already discussed everything among themselves and even with Olivia. The adults only had to accept their decision. In February, Jack proposed. The wedding was modest, attended only by the closest friends. Marcus was the best man and was very proud of his role. Molly was the maid of honor. "Now we're a real family," the boy announced solemnly at the reception. "Real," Jack agreed, hugging his new wife. A year later, their daughter Ivy was born. Marcus greeted the arrival of his sister with excitement. "Dad, she looks like me." "She has the same eyes." "Of course she does, your family. And when she grows up, I'll protect her from all the boys." Jack smiled. His son had learned to love, trust, and make plans for the future. The terrible months were behind them. Catherine wrote letters from the correctional facility. At first, Jack threw them away unread. Then he decided that Marcus had the right to know about his mother. "Mom says she misses you," he said, showing another letter. "And I miss her?" "No," the boy answered honestly. "She deceived me, and Olivia never deceives." "Aren't you angry with her?" "No, she's just a stranger now, and my family is here." By the time Catherine was released from the facility, Marcus was 14, a teenager who remembered his biological mother but considered his real family to be his father, Olivia, and little sister Ivy. Catherine requested a meeting. Jack thought long and hard and eventually agreed, but only in the presence of a psychologist and if Marcus wanted to. The meeting took place in a cafe on neutral ground. Catherine had aged, lost weight, and her eyes showed fatigue and remorse. To Marcus, she whispered, "Son, how you've grown." "Hello," the teenager replied politely. "My name is Marcus now, not Marcus. Have you forgiven me?" Marcus was silent for a long time, thinking over his answer. "I don't blame you. You did what you thought was right, but I can't forget. It's better for us to live separately, but can we see each other sometimes?" "I don't know. Maybe, if your dad decides." After the meeting, Jack asked his son, "How do you feel?" "Fine. It's just like meeting a distant relative. Kind of family, but kind of a stranger. If you ever want to see her, tell me. Or, if you don't, tell me that too." "Okay, Dad." Catherine tried to rebuild a relationship with her son, but unsuccessfully. Too much time had passed, and the trauma was too deep. Marcus was polite but distant. He forgave his mother as a person but could not love her as a son. At 18, Marcus enrolled in a technical university to study engineering, following in his father's footsteps. At 20, he married his classmate Louisa. At the wedding, Jack and Olivia stood beside the young couple, and little Ivy was the maid of honor. Catherine was also invited but sat in the last row. After the ceremony, she approached her son. "Be happy," she said quietly. "Thank you," Marcus replied. "And you too." That was their last conversation. Catherine never tried to interfere in her son's life again. 5 years later, Marcus had a son, Jack, named after his grandfather. Holding his grandson, Jack reflected on the long journey they had taken, from that terrible night in the cemetery to this happy day. "Grandpa, tell me a story," 3-year-old Jack asked. "What kind?" "About Dad when he was little." Jack smiled. "Once upon a time, there was a little boy who loved his dad very much. And his dad loved him very much too." The story ended well. Evil was punished, the family was restored, and love triumphed. Truthfully, the path to happiness had been long and painful. But isn't it always that way in real life? The main lesson Jack took from this story: never give up on those you love. Fight to the end, seek the truth, and do not accept lies. And then, even through the darkest times, dawn will inevitably come.